What's up, everyone? I pray that everyone is in a healthy place right now and in a healthy state of mind. What I want to talk to you about today is I want to continue the conversation of suicide prevention, some of the leading factors that heighten risk and ways to prevent yourself from taking the wrong turn or a loved one from taking the wrong turn down the wrong path. Most of the time, if someone is contemplating suicide, it's because they feel like that their life doesn't have meaning. They feel like they don't have a place in this world. They don't have a place that has purpose assigned to it. When the reality is that we do have a purpose in this world, and we already have a purpose that's assigned to us even before we're born. And we're going to talk more about that. Have you ever wondered why sometimes it's hard to cope with life's challenges? Why sometimes it feels like things are overwhelming to bear? We're going to talk about all of that today. Because sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes it feels like you can't bear it because what's in you just has to be uncovered. What's in you has to be unveiled. And any time that you're digging something up, if you can imagine taking a shovel and digging through the ground, taking a shovel and digging up the ground, whether it's to plant a seed or it's for another reason, it takes work, it takes sweat, and it's not always easy, but it takes work to dig out what's there. And when it comes to your purpose is inside of you, so it takes work to dig that out. In the United States itself, just last year, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death. When I hear that, it just makes me really unsettled. That so many lives are lost in this silent epidemic that is preventative, and we can help reduce the risk. Many health professionals believe that trauma plays a significant role in the correlation between suicide and depression. Depression can leave lasting scars that affect our ability to cope with life's challenges. But seeking help through therapy, support groups, loved ones, professional counseling can be that vital step towards healing, towards becoming whole, towards discovering who you are. And there are many factors that increase the risk for suicide or protect against it. Suicide is connected to other forms of injury and violence. And sometimes it's because of past trauma. Trauma from your childhood. Sometimes it's trauma from losing someone close to you. Sometimes it's trauma from being in an accident. But being connected to family and a community of support and having easy access to health care can decrease the behaviors and the suicidal thoughts. Just 2 years ago, suicide rates rose 36% from the pandemic. And suicide was responsible for over 45,000 deaths, which means that every 11 minutes, someone died from suicide. And to really put this into perspective, the number of people who thought about it is way higher. Millions of people in the United States, over 10 million people, thought about suicide last year. Over 3 million planned how they were going to do it. Over 1 million attempted suicide. And so although the number seems low in comparison to how many actually thought about suicide, and when you really put this in perspective, when you really think about it, that's just in the United States that over 10 million have thought about taking their life. And then when I look at platforms such as YouTube, I ask, why are you not talking about this? Why isn't anyone talking about purpose? Why isn't anyone talking about quality of life? Why isn't anyone talking about how do we prevent this from happening? Because although one person every 11 minutes is committing suicide, committing the act to taking their own life, there are many, many more that are thinking about it, that have not taken this step. Millions. And so here we're going to talk about one of the keys to digging out of that, and that's finding purpose, which is already in you. It's been observed through studies that a lack of purpose can heighten the risk of suicide. So what is purpose? Purpose is that driving force that brings meaning to our lives. It's what gives us a sense of direction and joy. Purpose is that feeling of fulfillment and direction in our lives. It's what motivates us to get up every single day and make a positive impact. Finding purpose starts with identifying our passions, our talents, our values. It's about aligning our actions with our innermost desires. So when you hear me say passion is the foundation of purpose, that's what I'm describing, because when we find purpose, we unlock the doors of opportunity and we create a meaningful life that's worth living. God bless the late Dr. Miles Monroe. Years ago, he was talking about purpose, and he talked about how purpose was already inside of us, and he used a cell phone to describe what he was saying. Before we ever get a cell phone in our hands, it's already been created. It's already been tested before it's delivered to us for our use. And the key thing is that when the cell phone is being created, the creator already knows what they want. The creator already knows what they want it to do. And so as we're born, we're already born with our purpose inside of us. We just have to discover it. And for us, as we're discovering our purpose, it's discovered through the trials. It's discovered through the struggles. It's discovered through the pain. It's discovered through trying to understand ourselves. It's discovered through connecting with our faith. And so that cell phone is being tested in that factory before it arrives to us. It's going through a series of tests in order to make sure that it functions according to its purpose when it's delivered to us. And some of us are out here as so even though your purpose may be challenging or difficult to find or to discover or to understand or to gain clarity about, understand that it is a process to understand your purpose, because we're unveiling it in time. When we find purpose, we experience a profound sense of gratification. It nourishes our soul and boosts our self-esteem and enhances our overall well-being. It transforms our lives, giving us the resilience and strength to face adversity head on. The more that you understand yourself, the more that you understand who you are, then you can discover what your purpose is. And so, high on the list on the journey is a higher level of emotional intelligence. Working through pillars such as self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, social awareness are ways of discovering your purpose. And the reason why is because with self-awareness, as you're in certain situations, as you understand why you're reacting to certain things or how it lands on you or how it feels and why it feels that way, you're starting to understand what drives your behaviors, what drives your reactions, what pushes your actions, what inspires you, what motivates you, what lifts you, what pulls you down. Then self-management is the ability to take that version of yourself and no matter what the situation is, no matter what the scenario is, being able to adapt to what is happening around you, to who you are, to the situation. And then relationship management, understanding the impact of relationships, understanding how you can move a room by something that you say or how something may land on someone else and how that impacts your relationship. It's all a journey. It's all a journey and it takes time. So stop rushing. Stop rushing like if you don't know exactly what your purpose is in this moment, then it's over. Because as long as you're in the pursuit of purpose, as long as you're in the pursuit of understanding purpose, gratification is going to come out of that along the way. But the minute that you stop pursuing purpose, the minute that you stop pursuing who you are or trying to understand who you are and how that connects with the world, how that connects with your faith, how that connects with what God has in store for you, the minute you stop doing that, that's when the low moments settle in. That's when the failures become overwhelming. That's when the failures feel like they're too much. And so as long as you have that light, which is the hope, which is the idea that you're still in pursuit of your purpose, you can make progress. You can overcome some of your challenges. You can balance resiliency effectively. You can perform at your best even when you don't feel like you're at your best. So as we talk about purpose, this also leads to gratification, which is crucial in the role of preventing suicide. Gratification is about finding joy and satisfaction in little things that make life beautiful. It could be as simple as spending quality time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or accomplishing personal goals. Find ways to connect with your blessings. Find ways to celebrate your wins. Find ways to appreciate the beauty of today. Find ways to appreciate the small miracles that have happened in order to position you where you are in this moment. As I move through life, one thing that I try to do in everything that comes up is I try to remain grateful. Even for the things that I didn't suspect. Even for the storms that arrive, because I know that at the end of that storm, on the other side, I am going to be a more discovered version of myself. I am going to be a more unveiled version of myself. Because sometimes going through hard times, sometimes going through difficulties, what it has a habit of doing, it has a habit of stripping away the things that are not supposed to be on us anyways. It has a habit of stripping away the things that aren't vital for us to move forward. It has a habit of lightening the load for us so we can move forward in our purpose. So don't be afraid of the storms as they come along. Don't be afraid of the trials as they come along, because gratification is just on the other side of that. Purpose is just on the other side of that. And you're making progress. You're one step closer. So connect with the blessings of life. Connect with the small wins. Connect and celebrate the things that are going well. And the things that are not going well, find a way to look at it and draw something positive out of it. Try to find a lesson out of it. What did you learn from that situation, and how are you going to apply that towards taking the next step? How are you going to apply that to make progress the next time? Because although we may experience low points, although we may experience failures in life, we do not want to stay in that place by doing the same thing over and over and over again. Sometimes you got to change the formula. And you're writing your own lessons to what that formula is supposed to be by what you go through in life. And so learn from it, build upon it, and create a better formula, and a better one, and a better one. And as you're able to do this, what this is going to do is this is going to improve your quality of life, which is another key factor in suicide prevention. Taking care of our mental and physical health, cultivating positive relationships, and seeking support when needed can make a world of difference. So create that positive environment yourself. Even if you feel like that positive environment isn't there, that you take the responsibility of creating that positive environment around you by building a strong support system. And sometimes people aren't going to bring positive things to that environment, and it's okay to excuse that out of that environment. It's okay to speak something positive on that and take it in a different direction. Finding purpose is your personal journey. Unlike anyone else's in this world, it's personal. It's personal. It may be tough pursuing a career that aligns with our passions, making a positive impact on others, or even finding solace in creative outlets. But the key is to listen to our hearts and discover what truly fulfills us. And then once we are there, we have to pursue that unrelenting, unyielding. There are many circumstances that increase the risk to suicide, and there are many circumstances that protect against that risk. And as we talked about, some of those things that can increase the risk includes trauma. Have you dealt with your trauma? Have you worked through the healing to deal with your trauma? And then depression or other mental illnesses. And then sometimes it can be something that's tangible, such as financial issues, the loss of a job, substance abuse. And then sometimes it's those non-tangibles, such as like loss of hopelessness. And then there's the outside factors, such as social isolation or bullying, loss of relationships, discrimination, lack of access to healthcare, or unsafe media portrayals of suicide, or dealing with the stigma. But when we look at circumstances that protect against that risk, they include things like having strong problem-solving skills, building a platform to do that. And one way to to help build that platform of strong problem solving skills, it starts with having situational awareness, understanding what's going on around you, and then avoiding things like complacency, but seeking things like situational understanding and awareness, seeking out formal education and informal education. Those are all things that help you develop in strong problem solving skills as a protective factor. And then that feeling of connection to others, support from families and friends, like those are all things that help. So as we move forward, let's look at ways of stabilizing positive environments around us, creating that network that we need in order to maintain a healthy disposition. No more. No more. One suicide is already too many. And so if you know somebody who's showing signs, if you are somebody who is thinking about it yourself, then reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out and call someone for help. You can call or text 988. 988 is a crisis line available 24 hours, 7 days a week. Because you are incredibly important. You matter to this world. You matter to all of those that are connected and that are around you. Even if you don't feel like it in the moment, even if you don't see it in the moment, you are special. And you have a place in this world. You have a purpose in this world that is unique, that is individualized to you. And what you give back to this world are from the gifts that you develop. They're from the talents that you develop by discovering your purpose. So even if you don't know exactly what that is right now, it doesn't mean that you don't have a purpose. It just means that you have to discover it. So don't give up. You look adversity in its face. You look at the difficult circumstances and situations in their face, and you say that I have a future. I have a future. I have a future. You're too important. You're too loved. You're too needed. Stand up in the rightfulness of who you are. Go through the process of discovery. Go through the process of understanding you. Go through the process of connecting with your faith. Go through the process of building a strong network around you. Go through the process of making the environment around you exactly what it needs to be in order to create a healthy version of you. In every moment, remind yourself of the good things. Remind yourself of the positive things. Remind yourself of your future. Remind yourself of the things you aspire to do. Remind yourself of who you aspire to be. But don't walk away. Don't turn the other direction. And as you connect with your purpose, then help someone else. Let them know exactly what you did in order to get to where you are. Pass on some love. Pass on a moment that someone else is going to need to share in. The other part about suicide is that when you look at over 10 million that have thought about suicide, How many are actually talking about it? Like, I know we got the stigma that we've been trying to erase when it comes to suicide, but if there's over 10 million that have thought about suicide just this past year, then that tells me that there's so many of us that have not said a word to anyone else. There's so many of us that have just kept it inside. So many of us that have not allowed others in. And that's part of the problem, is that people think that no one else struggles with it. People think that they're the only ones that are sitting with heavy thoughts. They're the only ones that are sitting in depression. They're the only ones who sometimes suffer from hopelessness, when that is a lie. Stop being afraid to tell your story. Stop being afraid to share some of the trauma that you experienced. Stop being afraid to share some of the heavy emotions, some of the heavy moments that you've had in life. Stop being afraid to share the bottom of your storms before you arrived at the other side. Everyone wants to just show the end product. Everyone just wants everyone to see, hey, here's the finished product. Here's what came out of all of this, but no one wants to talk about the work that it takes in order to arrive there. No one wants to talk about the things that you had to go through, the sacrifices that you had to make, because the thing is like, when you make sacrifices, you lose something. That's why it's called a sacrifice. It meant something to you. And as you make a sacrifice, it doesn't just become over in that moment. Even though the sacrifice might have only been for that moment, that continues to live with you throughout your life. Just as grief does. There's no exact science to grief and how long it lasts, but like, when you're dealing with the loss of someone, when you're dealing with the loss of something, it takes time to move effectively. It takes time to operate in your full self. It takes time to do that, but you have to learn how to do it over time. And as time goes on, it doesn't mean that the grief goes away. It just means that you deal with it differently. And so why aren't we talking about suicide? Why aren't we talking about what it takes in order to get out of that mind frame of loneliness? Get out of that mind frame of feeling hopeless. Why are we not talking about it? What I pray and what I hope is, I hope that these words sit with you. I hope that you find a way to connect with others through your own struggle, through your own pain. And I hope that as a world, we start going through the process to discover ourselves, going through the process to discovering our purpose, going through the process to discovering that there is meaning to our life. There is meaning to what we're supposed to do here on this earth. And being complacent isn't that meaning. We have to do the work in order to get there. And so I pray that you share this with a loved one that may have had some heavy moments. And I pray that what I've shared throughout this video finds a way to resonate with you, finds a way to help you see that your life is so much more than what you think it may be, that you are needed. I love you. I love you. I love you. And let's continue on this journey of purpose. Let's continue on this journey of inspiring action from purpose and motivation. Have a blessed one. Too many people close to me not to talk about suicide. Too many people close to me who thought for a moment their life wasn't worth it. But if you can hear me in this moment, if you can hear me right now, I need you to hear that you are more than what you feel in this very moment. You are greater than you can imagine, and this world needs you. It needs you to follow through with what your purpose is here on this earth. but you've got to pursue it. You've got to go after it, no matter how hard it is, no matter how heavy it feels right now. I need you to get up. I need you to stand up in the middle of your darkness and pursue your purpose. You're not alone, even if you feel the darkness all around you. Let me tell you what I learned in the darkness. Let me tell you what I felt in the darkness. I learned that it's not forever. I learned that there is a time limit, but even with a time limit, sitting in the dark will not make the light come any faster. Sometimes you have to stand up in the middle of your darkness. Sometimes you have to stand up in the middle of your pain. Sometimes you have to stand up in the middle of your struggle and move towards the light. Move towards your goals, no matter how heavy it feels. I learned there's a difference between adaptability and instability. In the middle of your darkness, we have to remain adaptable. Just as there are animals that are not nocturnal, who are able to adjust, who are able to fight their enemies, who are able to fight their predators in the dark, we have to be able to do the same. Adaptability means remaining grounded, but able to adjust to the situation around you, able to adjust to the circumstances, able to adjust to the storm that surrounds you in order to stay on the path of focus. Instability means that there is no foundation, but you have a foundation. And in life, when it comes to our purpose, sometimes the vehicle that we're using may change, which means that things around us might look a little bit different. Things around us might not look the way we want them to look, but it doesn't mean that our purpose has eluded us, because our purpose is right there in front of us. It's always going to be the same, even though the vehicle may change. So chase after your purpose with everything inside you, unrelenting, unyielding, unforgiving. I learned that sometimes if you're waiting for the light, you'll miss your opportunity. So pursue it and don't miss your opportunity. Right now, there's something trending called the Damar Hamlin effect, where CPR training and equipment have risen over 600% since Damar Hamlin was brought back to life on national television after he had fallen in an NFL game. He fell when he had no fight left in him. He fell right in front of everybody, but he had the right team around him who came out to him. And they were prepared to do whatever was necessary in case of an emergency. And so what this tells me is that sometimes you have to step outside of your isolation. Sometimes you have to step outside of your isolation. Sometimes you have to step outside of your isolation and get the right team around you just in case of emergency. Get the right family around you just in case of emergency. Just in case you have that moment where you feel like you can't move, where you feel frozen, where you feel like you can't get up. The right team will come out there and they'll get you back on your feet. The right team will come out there and make sure that your heart's beating again. The right team will come out there and make sure that you got the breath in your lungs. The right team will inspire you to move back towards your goals. The right team will remind you of your purpose and inspire action and motivate you to do what you are created to do. Many examples remain that we can draw from. Imagine how David may have felt when David was casted out from his family, when David was an outcast from Saul and Saul's kingdom and the army. Once a hero where they were singing songs about David, and then the next he was alone in the desert sitting in his darkness. But when it came to David, guess what? He didn't just sit through it. David fought in the desert. He bled. He trained. He sweated with every piece of pain that was inside of him. And then he came back and he conquered his darkness. And he got everything back that God said was for him. And so that's my message to you today, is go get what God says from you. But you got to stand up in your struggle. You got to stand up in your pain. You got to get the right team around you. And you got to become adaptable to the situation that is set before you. It's High Energy Tuesday. I love y'all, and let's go get after it. What's up, my beautiful family? It's High Energy Tuesday. Let's go. You think about all of the identity issues that people have as adults, or the confidence issues or the self-esteem issues. A lot of that is rooted in not having a relationship with a biological parent in some sense. And I experienced that myself. And so looking at those numbers, it really threw me for a loop. And
I had my father who was in my life since I was 1 year old. And I also had a biological father who I didn't have a relationship with, a genuine relationship with. And I went through my many challenges throughout life. Like I went through trauma, unbelievable trauma when I was 7 years old. And in Black families, we didn't talk about the trauma we experienced. We just went through the trauma and then we said, hey, life moves on, and we moved on with life. We didn't seek therapy or counseling. We didn't do those things. We were like, hey, you're all right. Let's move on. Let's focus on sports. Let's focus on academics. Let's focus on the next thing. That's what we did. But I was also experiencing these anger outbursts, and I didn't realize that it was rooted in the trauma I experienced when I was 7. And I actually didn't even deal with the trauma aspect until I was 26 years old. I'll talk more about that at the conference. But I didn't actually heal from it until, I was an adult. But I will say that during this time frame, the good part is that I had an example this time frame. I had a person in my life who I loved and who loved me unconditionally, who I can look to as an example, as a mentor, and say, Cody, that's who I'm supposed to be. I depended upon my father for an example of who I was supposed to be as I went through my own challenges. And when I was 16 years old, those challenges, they kind of erupted. My anger was just too much. It got to a point where my mother said, hey, we can't do that here anymore. And for my 16th birthday, she gave me $90 for a bus ticket to go experience who my biological father was for myself. And so I took a suitcase and I took that 13-hour bus ride to Michigan. And it was just a radical change for me in life. And my biological father, there were some fun times, but there were also some tough times. Some of those tough times were, me walking home because he was working 12 hours at the Ford plant. But there were good times like riding the four-wheelers. But I remember the first time I experienced homelessness was when I was there. My anger I just got tired of living in the situation that I was living in. I was just tired of it. And I remember them saying like, hey, if you don't like it, then you can go live somewhere else. And, there was nowhere else for me to go except for the street. And so that first night I laid in a ditch because it was just unbearably cold outside. And I was just trying to just get some shelter because the wind was just cutting right through my clothing. And when that wasn't enough, I went and I knocked on a friend's door down the street. I said, hey, can I stay here? He said, hey, sorry, man. My mom said you can't stay here tonight. And so I called my cousin on the phone. And this is when we had the minute phones. We had to load the minutes on. I used one of my minutes and I called them and asked if I could stay there. It's like, hey, sorry, you can't stay here tonight. Sorry, man. And so I went, I knocked on another friend's door and they allowed me in and they gave me some blankets and said, hey, you can sleep in the den. And they had 6 to 7 dogs. And because it was so cold outside, you couldn't keep animals out there in that kind of cold. So you had to bring them inside during the wintertime. And so they all slept inside the den. And so I laid there on the floor with them that night, just getting bit up by fleas. And I just remember having a moment and realizing, I was like, what in the world is going on with me in my life? I went from being a star athlete to having, my mom and dad in my life to this. And the struggle didn't end there. The struggle continued over time that year. And so I eventually went back to North Carolina. But I remember having a moment and just realizing that you shouldn't chase in the shadow of someone who wasn't supposed to be in your life during certain moments in life. A lot of times as we're going through our own trauma or we're going through the different things that we experience in life, we're looking to associate ourselves with other people because we don't know who we're supposed to be. We don't know what we're supposed to do in life. And so we're looking to try to find like, okay, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? And a lot of times in life, there are people who are not meant to be that example for us. And I had to learn that at 16 years old. And as I moved on through life, like there were different things that were happening. I still had all these anger outbursts. And I stopped playing sports while I was up there because I wasn't in school very much. I remember one time my cousin was getting threatened by a bunch of other guys in the school, and he brought a pellet gun to school in order to protect himself. And someone told on him, and the deputies kicked in the classroom door and they threw him down, on the floor. They took the pellet gun from him and threw him against the wall lockers. And he went to juvie that night. Like, he went, and he's been in and out of jail since then. And that same day, I remember being angry because I felt like I didn't have the adults in my life at this point, so all I had was my cousin. And so when he went to jail, I was angry and I wanted to find who told on him because they had just taken everything from me at that point. And I found this kid who I thought, told on my cousin. I was like, hey, he's trying to protect himself. And I put this kid in the hospital. And of course, they put the handcuffs on me, but this kid wouldn't press charges on me. He just wouldn't. And we had similar backgrounds, but I was thankful for another opportunity, because who knows where my life would have gone, if, that situation was more different, a little bit more different than that. So you're probably asking, like, where is this leading? Where is this going? I got to a point where, like, that situation I described before, where I got into that fight and put that kid in the hospital, like, that was a turning point, another turning point for me, because I was able to see where my anger was taking me. I could see the path of destruction that I was on. And to do that to somebody who looked just like me, it was like looking into a mirror. And it's like, what are you doing to yourself? And for that person and his family to recognize that I still had value, even though I did a heinous thing, I had to make a change. And as we move through life, like, to us, there are cues that happen internally where we know that we're steering off the path of who we're supposed to be. We're steering off the path of who our character is supposed to form into. And we know things are out of our normal character battle rhythm. And you have to take responsibility for that. Because what I found along the way was that my self-confidence, my self-esteem, my self-identity, it didn't rest with anybody else. It rested with me and with inside of me. And I had to become desperate to get back onto the path. So even though I didn't know exactly what to do or how to do it, I knew that I was supposed to be going in a different direction. And thankfully, I had an example of what that direction should be. And so I used that example as a way to get back on the right path. But I knew inside that something was off, that I wasn't doing the right thing. And so if you're ever in that place and you know that something's out of character for you, that it's not a normal pattern for you to act a certain way, that your behaviors are just a little bit off, become desperate to find those answers. Don't just look by it. Don't just look by trauma. Don't just look by incidents and say, I'm just going to quickly move by it. Don't do that. Look at it. Ask the hard questions and become desperate to find those answers. Become desperate to get back on the path. Become desperate to get to that door of success. Become desperate to get to greatness, because so many others are tied to that or connected to that. And they're looking on you so they can see the path that they need in order to get back on their own path. And back on the path. Get back focused. Because you're meant to do so many more things that you've already done. Even if you're at a place where you're like, hey, I've accomplished all of these things. There's more. If you have breath in your body, there's more. And I know that you have dreams. I know you have things that you've always wanted to accomplish, that you wanted to do in life. Well, now's the time. But if you want to become truly unlocked, if you want to become truly unhinged, if you want to become truly connected with who you're supposed to be, then you've got to look at the things that you've went through. You've got to ask the hard questions, and you got to find the answers to that. And there's no shortage of help to do it. Through therapists, through coaches, there's no shortage of that. As a child, as a teen, I didn't know those were options. I didn't know there were other ways of dealing with my emotions. I was just sitting in it and just growing in anger. And in the meantime, I'm competing in sports. I'm working my butt off in school, and I'm just trying to figure it out. And I wasn't dealing with the trauma. I wasn't dealing with the things that I had been through, but it was disrupting every other part of my life. Because when it comes to those unhealed areas of our life, well, let me tell you, it's just like a jack in the box where you're just cranking over time, and that at that unexpected point in time in life, at that unexpected place, just boom, that jack pops out of the box and surprises you and everyone else. You're like, where did that come from? Well, let me tell you, that's what happens when you just bury it. That's what happens when you just put it aside. That's what happens when you don't deal with it. And then you're in a place of making bad decisions because you're confused about why you're acting in certain ways. So don't look by it. Don't look over it. Because there's so much more greatness that is awaiting. There is legacy that is awaiting. So let's continue to move forward. And be an anchor for somebody else. Be a mentor. There are too many children in the world. There's millions of children in the world that are out here that don't have an example, that don't have a father in the home, or don't have a male example they can pull from. Become a mentor. Take it upon yourself to be responsible for those that you've got a relationship with, and show up in their life. Everyone goes through a storm in life. Everyone has been through something difficult or challenging in life that has just rocked the boat in a sense. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's important to go through the process of unveiling and discovery as we go through the storm. Whether that's after the storm and a point of reflection, or whether that's during the storm and focusing on the work in order to get to the other side of that storm. A storm is a disturbance in the atmosphere. Although there are heavy winds and rains that come during the storm, there are also some good things that are taking place during the storm. Sometimes it's a cleansing for the land, or sometimes it's nutrients that are being spread across the many plants and species so they can continue to thrive. There are many good things that come from it. And what can you gain from the storm itself? What's on the other side of that storm? But to really get to a point where we're talking about the storm and what goes on in the storm, I want to tell a little bit of a story. God is so good. I don't know if y'all even know, but I want to talk about one of the storms that I went through years ago. Years and years ago, I went through a divorce, and in order to get free, because we're created to be free, in order to get free from what I would describe as a psychological nightmare or state of abuse, I had to walk away from everything that was familiar to me. I had to walk away from everything that I had worked so hard to build. And I did it with a suitcase. And what's funny about this is that during this time frame, there was a house that I was working on. It belonged to my parents. And I would go over there and I would cut the grass. Although nobody lived there for about 5 years, I would still take care of the outside of the home. Cutting the grass, getting the weeds off the house. I didn't do any work on the inside at that point, but I had somewhere to go. That house had been vacant for somewhere between 5 to 10 years. Nobody was living inside the home, but I took care of the outside end. And so as I arrived there in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter, I go inside and it's cold in there. It's freezing in there. There's no furniture in there. There's no electricity. There's no
running water or any of that. And so I had to wait until the next week in order to get all that stuff turned on. But during that time frame, I still had to go to work. I remember laying on the floor that first night and just reflecting on everything that had just taken place and just thinking about how can I move forward? How can I make progress? And I didn't know, I didn't have an answer, but I woke up the next morning and I remember the sun rising and just having this warm feeling. And just knowing that I just had to focus on the work. I had to do the job that I was charged with, and everything in turn would follow. Everything in turn would work out. There would be a positive side that came out on the other end. And so I didn't just lay there in sadness. I didn't lay there in depression. I picked myself up. There was a lot of cleaning that I had to do inside. There were a lot of replacing of things like the toilet, the vanity, the floors. There was so much work that had to be done that I needed to focus on the work. And so I would arrive at my professional job at 3 o'clock in the morning to ensure that I could take care of my personal hygiene. I would brush my teeth. I would take my showers. I would work out. And I would do well at work, because I could tell you that even as I was going through my storm, I was still performing on the job. That year, I was first on the promotion list that year. Nobody at work had any idea what was going on at home. And I wasn't sad because I was focused on the work. So I would leave work and then I would go home and I would continue the work through the night. Also at play here was I had my sons who were coming to visit in about 3 weeks. And I needed to make sure that they had a nice warm home to settle in for the holiday break over Christmas. And so I got my butt up and I went to Lowe's. I had to replace the toilet. I paid $60. I didn't know how to replace the toilet, but I knew I needed to because I needed working plumbing in the home. I watched some YouTube. I read some manuals. And we don't always know what we're capable of doing until we're put into a position to where we have to do it. I had to do it. I didn't just lay on the floor during the storm. I picked myself up. What are you focused on during the storm? Because what I discovered, what I unveiled is that it's what you're focused on during the storm that's killing you. It's not the storm itself. What are you focused on? A lot of times we get so wrapped up in the elements and what's taking place with the wind, the water, the storm, the electricity, the lightning, the thunder, that we are just frozen in place and stuck somewhere. What are you focused on in the storm? When we look at biblical examples like Peter, when he walked on water, well, guess what? He was walking on water until he started focusing on the water itself. He was focused on the wrong thing. So what are you focused on during the storm? Because that is what is killing you. It's not the storm itself. And so as we get to a place of making progress in life, as we get to a place of sustained success, as we get to a place of discovery on purpose, then we have to understand what we're supposed to focus on during the storm. Because like I said, I wasn't sad, I wasn't depressed as I went through it, because I was focused on the work. I was focused on what I was supposed to do, and I went to work and I did it. And I had trust and faith that everything was going to be okay. I knew that, hey, God, if you can get me out of that situation that I was in, the situation I felt was killing me, if you can get me out of that, if you could deliver me from that, then I could survive anything. I knew that this was a new beginning. And so I didn't just lay on the floor. I picked myself up and I did the work. And so no matter what the storm is that you're going through in life, because we're all going to go through a storm, you have to get to a place where you're able to focus on what you're supposed to be focused on, but don't get so distracted by everything taking place around you that you lose your focus. What are you focused on in the storm? And I would tell you that as I'm going through the process, I was realizing I was unveiling things about myself that I just didn't know before. I was seeing different levels of strength, different levels of clarity and understanding that I didn't know existed there before. And I was becoming
a better human. I was becoming a better man, a better father, a better soldier, a better everything. I picked up a camera for the first time professionally during that time frame. I started a business during that time frame. So many things happened as I was going through the storm because I just focused on the work. And I remember during that holiday season, my sons and I, we laid warm in a bed because eventually I was able to get a bed. Eventually I was able to get couches. Eventually I was able to get a television. It took time and I had to focus on the work, but eventually I got there. And there's something on the other side, because I can tell you that ever since then, like, life has been great. And that's how I know God is good. My wife and I bought and sold 2 properties. We just invested in a 3rd property at this point. I focused on the work and I picked myself up. And so it's High Energy Tuesday, y'all. Y'all continue to get after it. I love y'all, and I'm out. And then today we're talking about the preparation before the storm. And that is also an integral piece as we navigate life storms that come at us in unpredictable ways. Too many times in life we find ourselves in the middle of a storm wondering if we had prepared adequately enough. I will tell you that I've had many storms in my life, and in the many storms that I've had in life, I've lost relationships, I've lost friendships, I've lost so many things that were intangible and tangible at the same time. And some of us are moving through life as if we don't have anything to lose in the storm. But that's not the truth, because we don't know what it's going to cost us until we're in the middle of it, or until after it's already passed. Years ago, I remember when I was on my very first deployment, I was responsible for giving the team their routes as they went about their day on convoys. And my friend was getting ready to go out on this convoy, and I remember seeing him right before he went out and giving him my work. And I didn't realize in that moment that would be the last time that I saw my friend alive, because he went out and the convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device and he died instantly, killed in action. And for a very long time I wrestled with the question, did I do enough before they went out? And I fought and wrestled with that question time and time again as I visited that same space. And it was a moment in life that changed my world forever, because I knew that I didn't want to wrestle with that question in any capacity again in the future. And so I began on a journey of deep self-reflection and self-awareness. But I also got to a point where I realized that my behaviors had to line up with what I was saying was important. If something else was more important, then my behavior had to show that. And so instead of leaving after 12 hours of working, I went to a place of, I'm going to work until the job is finished. I'm going to make sure that I give this my very best effort that I can. Because there's peace in when you give your very best. The points in time when we're wrestling in the storm is when we know that we could have done better, or we could have done more. Some of us are moving through the storm as if we don't have a thing to lose. But I can tell you that if you really get to a point where you're doing the lip service, you're saying that things matter to you, your behavior's got to show that. And your behavior is going to show by how you go and you prep before the storm arrives. Because as we know in life, there are going to be storms. We can't avoid the storms, but we can get ourselves to a position to where we're sturdy enough to where we can withstand the things that are coming. We can become the strength in the middle of the storm. We can become the power in the middle of the storm, because I can tell you that people are watching. They may not say anything. They may look at you with funny eyes. They may talk about you behind your back or around you, but people are watching because they want to know how to get through the storm as well, so you can become that example as you find your peace long before the storm arrives, because we know that we live in a life where there are storms. I remember Hurricane Matthew, when Hurricane Matthew came to North Carolina. That was a very tough time for a lot of people. I remember being in the middle of that storm and just seeing the wind just rip parts of the house apart, and the rain just batting down on the house. The power was out for a couple of weeks. The food went bad inside the refrigerator. But the worst part about Hurricane Matthew wasn't the hurricane at that moment. Even though it brought damage, even though it broke certain things, the worst part was after the storm was gone. It was the floods that took place, the raising water that continued to happen, the many buildings that were underwater, the roads that were blocked that we couldn't travel because of the water blocking it. That was the tough part, because many of us had weathered the storm and we got through the storm, but it was everything afterwards that we weren't completely prepared for. And so how are you preparing for the storm? Because how you prepare for the storm is going to be your disposition when the storm is past. And so if you're not preparing before the storm arrives, then you're not going to be in a great disposition. And even if you're in the middle of the storm, it's still not too late to prepare. What is your disposition, and how are you preparing before the storm arrives? And so as we move through life, as we move through the many storms in life, generally we know that a storm is coming. There are many indicators along the way that a storm is coming. Some of those indicators, we can see it, we can feel it. We can see the storm clouds as they're beginning to swell. We can feel the wind as it's picking up. And as we see the indicators, we have to follow our instinct and we have to prepare. Go out and tie down the things that are important to us. Go out and pull the things inside that we don't want to get swept away by the storm or lost or damaged or broken in some capacity. We go out and we prepare ahead of the storm. We go to the store and purchase items in case we lose power. We purchase food in case we can't make it to the store for a period of time after the storm. But what are we doing about our relationships and friendships? How are we preparing ourselves? Because as unpredictable as life is, there are so many things that come at us. It could be the loss of a loved one or a friend. It could be financial difficulties. There are so many things that are unpredictable in life. I remember 1 week, in the span of days, transmission light came on. The AC went out inside the house. And then several other things that happened all at the same time. And what I was realizing is the time to prepare financially is not in the middle of when that's taking place. The time to prepare was before that took place. But I will tell you that even in the middle of your storm, if you have not prepared adequately before the storm arrived, you still have an opportunity to prepare in the middle of the storm. Whether that's mending some of those broken relationships or reaffirming some things along the way. But how do you prepare spiritually? How do you prepare mentally, physically, emotionally? Because I can tell you that physically, the time to prepare to pull somebody out of the line of fire in a combat zone is not in that moment. The time to prepare is long before that kind of storm arrives. It's in the waking up at 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning in order to
work out. It's in the battle drills that you do with your buddies through the years in order to prepare. It's the many things you do before the storm arrives. So how do you do that spiritually? How do you do that mentally and emotionally? You have to prepare in a way to where you're trying to raise or improve your emotional intelligence. I got to a point where I understood where I sat with things. I had some self-awareness, but I didn't have the tools. So I went and I got help. I saw a therapist, I saw a life coach. And I got help in a way where I was able to connect with the tools that I needed in order to not just understand where I sat with certain things, but understand how to manage as I sat with certain things. And those are two very important pillars when it comes to emotional intelligence: self-awareness and self-management. And then relationship management. How are you managing your relationships? And then in this world, this day and age, so many things are going on. There's many social injustices that are still taking place. There are deaths that are happening, murders. People are experiencing trauma on levels that haven't been seen before. So before you enter and exit a space, how are you preparing yourself socially? Social awareness is another major pillar of emotional intelligence. And so in the middle of my storms, I got to a place where I didn't want to live with being on the opposite side of that question of, did I do enough? Did I do what I needed to do? And so preparation has become key, because as unpredictable as the storms can be in life, our preparation does not have to be unpredictable. If you want to be in a place of growth, if you want to be in a place where you're better prepared to deal with the unpredictability, then you have to work on it now. And it's not too late. And I will tell you this as well. We all know that in the storms, there's pain that comes with that. But we also know that in the storm, the eye of the storm is the quiet place. That's where the peace is. And if you want to make it to the quiet place in the storm, then you have to do the preparation in order to get there before the storm arrives. But you have sat in your pain long enough. You have suffered in your pain long enough. It is time to stand up in your pain. It is time to stand up and make some progress. Even if you got tears that are rolling down your face, even if you got sweat that's pouring off of your body, even if you are injured, it is time to stand up in your pain, because you have to focus on the hope, the other side that's going to pull you out. And as we're able to pull or grab onto something like hope, which I see as something that is tangible, it's physical, you can grab onto it, you also have to do the preparation to get yourself to a place where you can become the peace in the middle of the storm. Listen, y'all. Laziness has a cost. Lack of effort has a cost. Disregard has a cost. Hitting the snooze has a cost. Pushing something off has a cost. If we push it off till tomorrow, well, guess what? In the middle of the storm, we don't know what the cost is going to be. So it's important to stop pushing it off. It's important to get up and put the work in. It's important to put the right and full energy into it, because we have to prepare before the storm arrives. And so get up. Stop making excuses. Write that list down. Follow through with the things that you're saying you're going to do. Follow through with your behaviors about the things that you're saying are important. As the storm is coming, you have to go out and you have to prepare the items, the tangible things and the intangible things, as if you have something to lose in the storm.
If you want peace in the storm, then it starts before the storm arrives. And one of my first storms in combat that really, really hit me, I lost a friend who was also a husband. He was also a father. His children are grown now. But the world lost something in that storm. And what's really wild about that storm is that 10 months into that deployment, it was supposed to be a 12-month deployment. We were only supposed to be gone for a year. 10 months in, we got extended for an additional 3 months. And so when this happened, we were already supposed to be home. He was supposed to be having dinner with his family. And that's not something that was easy to live with at the time. But I found a way to the other side. And you can find a way to the other side as well. But being on the opposite side of that question is not something that I was prepared for. But now, I am prepared for. And that's not the only friend that I've lost over the years. There have been many that have given their lives and have sacrificed for this country. Many. And so, any body of work that I have, I don't take it lightly. Any preparation that's necessary to try to provide some predictability, that's important to me. Because we don't know what the cost is going to be in the middle of the storm. Listen, y'all, I've come to an area in my life where I've become obsessed with growth in every capacity possible. Personally, professionally, academically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, because life requires us to grow. And you have to become obsessed with growth. You have to come to a place where you know that there's going to be a cost associated with the disregard. And if you lay stagnant, then you're actually going backwards. You're going in the wrong direction. Because the world is dynamic and things are changing, and one storm is not going to look like the next storm. They're going to bring their own elements that are going to be just a little bit different, with a little bit more unpredictability. And so I'm a life learner. I continue to find ways to educate myself in a formal and informal capacity. I find ways to work on my emotional intelligence. I find ways to work on my physical fitness. I find ways to spend time with God and prepare myself spiritually. I find ways at growth. I've become obsessed with growth. And so if you want to become the peace in the storm, that's one path. As I move through life, so many things have been lost. As I move through life, so many things that I can't go back and get. But I understand that at this point in time, like, some things are lost, okay, but there's so much more at stake. There's so much more that cannot be afforded to be lost. So many opportunities, because no matter what your profession is, no matter what you're charged to do in life, there is a cost in the storm if you do not prepare. And we don't know what that cost is. We don't know. So prepare in order to be able to meet the cost at the intersection and be able to be in a place of strength, be in a place of power, be in a place of you, because you are great and you are greater than what you can imagine. And it's time to stop walking and living and suffering in your pain. It's time to stand up. It's High Energy Tuesday. This is Storm Series Part 2. Let's go.